Hey there, welcome back to another video. Today we have a gigantic 6R140 on the bench we got to tear down, inspecting and see what's up with it. So, backstory here is it's out of a 2019 F450 with a 6.7 diesel 4x4 unit, and it's actually owned by the uncle of my shop customer. So, his uncle is a contractor, he owns a home building business and what have you, and his crew of guys was at a job site with this thing, and unfortunately they got stuck in the sand or mud and they tried to free themselves numerous times without much success. And as you know, whenever you're stuck either in sand, mud, or snow or whatever, that engine's getting revved to 4,000, 5,000 RPMs as you're trying to free yourself. And you do that multiple times, you're going to overheat the engine, you're going to overheat the transmission, and bad things can happen at that point. So the shop owner thinks the forward clutch pack is welded because the vehicle wants to move forward in park and neutral, and it binds up in reverse. So we'll find out the extent of the damage once we have it apart, but that's kind of the hypothesis at this point. So a couple quick things on these, just over and above all other transmissions, key considerations and things you need to prepare for. One is the sheer bulk and size of this thing. These are 350 pounds dry. I don't know what they are wet. The torque converter weighs around 100 pounds by itself. A couple of sub-assemblies are also very, very heavy. The front drum complex, where all the hubs and the overdrive drum and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 5R clutch drum. That whole unified assembly weighs about 85 to 100 pounds, somewhere in there. The Planet's like 65 or 70 pounds. So you're dealing with very, very heavy components. It's just outsized relative to most other units that you'll likely see in otherwise light-duty trucks. Light duty meaning 1 ton or less. Now, some of these were installed in commercial vehicles as well, so your 2-ton axles and six, I guess 6x4s or whatever, commercial trucks and such. So anyway, that's first consideration. Secondly, you're going to need a couple of specialized tools. One, you're going to need a very large pair of snap ring pliers for the center support snap ring. Okay, these 6R140s, just like their little brothers, the 6R60s, 75s, and 80s, as well as the GM and Dodge counterparts, they're all based on the ZF6 HP26, so they have the same architecture, largely the same design. GM took some, I guess liberties, or they made some significant engineering changes to their versions, but they all share a few things in common, and one of them is a giant snap ring in the center of the case, which you need those giant specialized pliers to remove safely. The other things you're going to need are a very large spanner socket, a specialized socket for the output shaft nut, and a torch so they can heat the nut up to melt all of the thread locker that the factory installs, or lathers over the threads before they install the nut. So that thing's on there with 150 foot-pounds of torque, and they tell you to break it loose by hand with a breaker bar using the socket. So we're going to try that. I'll be honest, I just use an impact because it's faster. Yes, it damages the pins on the socket, but whatever. It's an operating cost. You can replace the pins. Alright, so let me get you a little bit closer. We'll take a look around at the case, point out a few things, and then we'll get started. So just like any other transmission, these 6R140s underwent several engineering changes throughout their production life cycle, which went from 2011 to 2020. And so if you're looking for either a rebuildable core or a good used transmission to install in place of the one that went bad, first thing you want to do is look over here and look for this series of characters right here. This is going to be your production date code. So this is a 2019 model year vehicle. This transmission was manufactured on May 3rd of 2019, so 5/3/19. Okay, this other stuff I'll annotate. It's not critical when it comes to just identifying the year, but application-wise, these transmissions only went into 2 different engines to my knowledge. I just moved the camera out a little bit so you can see the full bell housing. So they went into the Powerstroke 6.7 diesels and the 6.2 Boss gasoline engines. The bell housing bolt pattern is your key differentiator, and it's obvious as to what application a given 6R140 is associated with. All your perfectly round bells like this are associated with the 6.7 diesels, and the truncated pattern that's kind of, I guess, hexagonal in shape are going to be for your Boss 6.2 engines. Alright, the third third critical piece of information that you're going to want to look for on the outside of the case is going to be this tag right here. This is going to have your solenoid strategy code and your solenoid body ID code. All right. If you're a tech and you take one of these in, you want to make sure that you cross-reference these numbers with those stored in the vehicle's powertrain control module or engine control module. They have to match. All right, the solenoid strategy code also has to match the corresponding code on the valve body, which you'll see once we get the pan off and the filter out of the way. Okay, there were 3 different output shaft configurations for these. So you have a 4x4, they all look like this, and then you have 2 different 2-wheel drive setups. You have what's called a flanged yoke design, and then you have a slip yoke design. So the flanged yoke has, you know, a 3 kind of fingered or eared flange, and the slip yoke design has a longer shaft, but obviously no flange, and it uses a bushing to lubricate that slip yoke in the extension housing. So all these 4x4s have a seal here. The slip yoke design does not have a seal in the back of the case, so we got to knock the seal out. Then we're going to apply heat here, and then we're going to go ahead and try to take it off with a breaker bar, at least break it loose. And you know, we'll see how that goes. If I don't have much success, then I'm just going to zip it off with an impact. So if you're going to use an impact, make sure you use a 1/2 inch at minimum, either a good battery operated impact or an air powered tool. And you want to make sure you have 120-ish psi in your air source if you're going to run an air impact. So minimum 1/2 inch, 3/4 is a little bit more desirable. Either way, it's on there tight. Okay, got the seal off. Despite what you see in the inset, it took a good long while to get this thing free of the case. So just be prepared for that. There may be a special tool or chisel or something you can use to, you know, more efficiently extract it, but it took me about 4 or 5 minutes of just tapping all the way around and, you know, slowly working it throughout the entire circumference, getting it off. And, you know, it looks like the case got maybe a little boogered, or maybe this is part of the seal still stuck on there. It's not going to hurt anything. Worst case scenario, if you do, you know, make a boo-boo here, you can smooth it out once the case is fully emptied. Just take some emery cloth, sandpaper, or, you know, a grinder if you need to, and just smooth out any rough transitions that would otherwise prevent the seal from seating fully flush to this portion of the case. All right, so one of the other things you're going to need as part of, you know, your 6R140 tool suite is a sturdy workbench. Do not take one of these apart on like a desk or your old dining room table, or, you know, even some of the specialized transmission building benches that they sell on places like Jegs and Summit. I'll be honest, I wouldn't trust them with one of these. So if you don't have such a bench, then you're going to be doing it on the floor, and that's not ideal either. All right, before we go ahead and, you know, take the output shaft nut off, let's do a couple of basic tests that you would normally do on teardown. First, go ahead and spin your output shaft. Make sure it's obviously, you know, in a range position other than park. That clicking you hear is your mechanical diode. These diodes are part of the rear planetary assembly, and they're usually in good shape. You usually don't have to replace them, but if you do, most folks will just simply swap the entire rear planetary and mechanical diode one-way clutch assembly, you know, in one shot. You can take them apart, but it gets messy because the diode, you know, individual elements will go all over the place unless you're super careful. All right, so 4x4 units, they'll spin quite easily in the direction engine rotation. In this case, from your point of view, it's counterclockwise. In reality, from the engine's point of view, it's clockwise. But you know, it's not going to turn by hand in the other direction. So spinning it around, all right, you can see all the melt that took place here. This might need a pump. I mean, the seal, the sealing element separated from the flange. Okay, so like I said, a lot of heat was introduced. All right, spin the shaft, make sure that you spin in both directions. Now, what I'm going to do is put it in park. right, now it's in park. Let's try to spin it. It'll spin counterclockwise, but it locks up clockwise. Okay. All right, end play on these things, I believe is 6 to 18 thousandths. If that's not correct, I will annotate. But you're not going to be able to feel 6 thousandths of an inch if you try to, push and pull on the input shaft like I usually do. But you should feel 18. About 12 to 15 thousandths is when you can start to feel it. All right, I don't know if you can hear that, but I can feel movement in this shaft. So it does have the requisite amount of end play, or at least it appears to. It's not abnormal. If this had a ton of end play or it had none at all, that would be a problem. But like I said, if you want to be certain, go ahead and affix a dial indicator with either the special tool that Adaptacase makes for the input shaft to lower it into the case, the whole assembly once it's all put together, or a set of good sized vice grips, and just use your dial indicator and your vice grips to take a reading. So with Ford 6R80s and two-wheel drive units, you need to take a reading at the back of the case as well, because there's a rear end play spec that you have to manage to. So like all these 6Rs, this one uses a selective spacer that sits at the very rear of the pump stator on top of the sun gear, and the forward sun gear, that is, and that is what you use to manage to or adjust your front end play. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up. I'm going to try to stabilize it so that I can get a breaker bar on that thing and, try and take it off that way. Like I said, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but we'll see. Okay, if it's still in park, go ahead and take it out so that you can spin the output shaft all the way around and then fire up your torch, and then you're going to apply heat in this area here so that you can melt that thread locker. Alright, just a simple torch is really all you need. Alright, you want to have the flame over the nut itself, not the shaft. Alright, be real careful too, because everything back here will get hot. So, wear thick gloves. Heat will also help expand the nut, so it makes it easier to break loose. All right, now I'll go ahead and put the transmission into park. And attach your spanner socket and breaker bar. And then go ahead and see if you can break it loose. Just gotta get more leverage. Once you have it broken loose initially, the rest you can zip off with an impact. I'll break it loose just a little bit more. Now I want to show you what I did, because I think I'm zoomed in a little bit too much to see. So I'm going to zoom out and had it roughly here. And what I did is I literally stood on it. I mean, this is actually not correct. Let me rotate it. All right, so I had it roughly at 90-degree, parallel to the floor, and then I literally got up on the transmission like this, putting all my weight, and I had to jump up and down all my weight as if I was on parallel bars, and that got it free. Now what I'm going to do is take my 3/4 ratchet and socket here and just take the rest of it off. And that cracking you're hearing is that piece of wood there. It's not anything associated with the case. Okay, take note position of the bearing, just like this. And then here is your race. You want to check a race nut. It looks like a race. So you want to check to see if the threads are boogered. You can take note of all the thread locker that's used. I mean, obviously this comes out, bad things will happen, so I understand why they use it, but I'll have to clean this up and if necessary replace this if it's no good. Whenever you have overheating, especially if it's in the back of the case, maybe you burn up the low reverse frictions or what have you, a lot of heat will be introduced here and it'll booger this this nut. Alright, there is a race, and you know, this time I mean to say race, and it's going to be right here. Looks like it wants to stick around. So let's see if we can persuade it off. Okay. It's orientation agnostic, meaning you can put it on whichever way, it doesn't matter. All right, let me clean this up a little bit and then we'll go ahead and resume. Flip the thing over so we can get the belly exposed, take the pan off, take the valve body assembly off, and then get the case emptied. Okay, now that we have the nut off, so not a whole lot to do with the rest of the exterior of the case, like all the speed sensors and everything else that you need to deal with as far as taking stuff off, putting it back on is underneath or inside the case. But the one thing you want to do is collapse these two locking tabs on the case connector so that you can pull the harness out of the way once you have it all disconnected and whatnot. So just take your screwdrivers, it's going to be one here and one there, you know, where you see me putting it. And you can grab a hammer. And you can see this one has a chunk missing out of it. It's seen better days. No biggie. We replace on overhaul. So, alright, now you can go ahead and remove it without having to dick around on the exterior of the case anymore. Alright, check this vent tube, this little valve here. If this is clogged, then you're going to have moisture accumulating inside the case. So you obviously don't want that. All right, this is caked with mud and filth. So we'll have to look at that once the case is empty. 10mm on the pump the case bolts. Now that we've kind of hastily assessed our in play, we can take these off. All these bolts are the same length. Pretty straightforward deal. Alright, I'm going to reposition the camera so that we can flip this thing over and get the pan off and start working it. Alright, so it looks like we have only a couple of pan bolts. The shop did tell me that they dropped the pan just to check it out, see if there was anything that could be done from underneath, anything at all. But I mean, you know, my tech guy's pretty knowledgeable about transmissions specifically. He's rebuilt them before, so he kind of recognizes what the problems are based on the symptoms. And this one, you know, he knew immediately that it had to come out. Alright, I hear something clanging around here. That last one. Oh, he put all the rest of them in here. Okay. Alright, so as you can see, the fluid is filthy and it's burnt to a crisp. It stinks real bad. So get these out of the way. Alright, so the rest of these bolts are either going to be 8mm or Torx 30. Alright, let me get you a little bit closer and then we'll begin. Okay, filter bolts, there's 3 of them. These bolts are dual purpose, meaning they hold both the filter and they play a role in securing the valve body assembly to the case. This is going to be your transmission fluid temperature sensor. Here are your variable force solenoids. You have speed sensors. There's going to be a rear speed sensor and a forward speed sensor or input speed sensor. These are your feed tubes. If you have a 2-wheel drive with a slip yoke, you're going to have 3 tubes instead of 2. This is going to be your 2.6 feed. Okay, this little bolt down here, that's going to be what secures the low reverse apply piston housing to the case. So 8mm. When I have these bolts off, I'll show you something that you need to know about the bolts. Okay, first take note of this very long bolt in the rear. Alright, goes right there for the filter, and then you have 2 what I will call intermediate length bolts. Alright, all these filters are the same. Alright, so you have your fluid temp sensor. Let's go ahead and get rid of the connector. Disconnect it. Alright, so here's your range position switch, your main case connector here, and then this is going to be your output speed sensor connector. You don't have to disconnect it if you don't want. This is going to be the connector for your input speed sensor, and the speed sensor is underneath the valve body in roughly this position here. So you have your manual valve linkage arm and your selector shaft and rooster comb assembly here. So that's retained by a roll pin. Your parking linkage, this is going to be your guide plate, and then use your parking rod for the parking pole, and then the output ring gear assembly, output shaft ring gear, it's, you know, all one deal. That's also going to serve as your parking gear. So you have your 2 Torx 30 here, a Torx 30 here, another Torx 30 there, a Torx 30 there. Alright, let me go ahead and we'll start removing the valve body to case bolts. In fact, let me get the Torx 30 bolts out of the way first. Alright, I'm not trying to go super fast with this teardown simply because I want you to see exactly how things go so that, you know, it kind of makes sense. It doesn't feel like you're flying by the seat of your pants, or, you know, you're having to constantly rewind the video to look at things multiple times. I just wanted to make sure I was, you know, lefty-loosey there. So this is going to be that bolt that goes to the low reverse piston housing, and for the most part this bolt is unique in terms of its length, so you won't misidentify it. Alright, turn this thing over a little bit. Alright, this should get you a good face-on view. So you'll notice there's some arrows. Arrow, arrow, and there should be a third arrow. So one here, and one here. And then the rest of these bolts along this back row are all valve body case bolts. Alright, I want to disconnect the speed sensor here. So push down on this tab and pull, and then now we can get rid of the valve body. So you have alignment dowels pins here for the valve body to case, and here. So these two locations. So let's take a look at the bolts real quick. You notice they're not all the same length. So these bolts here. Alright, so you have 4 short bolts and 3 long bolts on the valve body after you remove the filter bolts, so 10 bolts total. Short bolts are back here other than that long filter bolt, and then the long bolts are denoted by the arrows, except for this one, but it's a long bolt. So there's the difference in length. Get that so you can actually see it. Alright, this is a hair longer than that, but it is visually apparent. You won't mix them up if you're paying attention. Alright, now we're going to disconnect our transmission range sensor connector. So there's going to be a push tab right here, right where my finger is. You're just going to grab it, push down on it, and yank up. And it comes right off. Alright, I'm going to remove the parking pole guide plate as well, because that may or may not interfere with the wiring harness. So 4 8mm bolts. Then you're going to have a return spring, and the return spring is going to hook into the parking pole, and then the small hook is going to engage the little arm right here. Okay. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to free up the manual valve linkage arm. Just pull rearward on it, and then we'll go ahead and we'll pull off the valve body. Fish your connector through, and you have the entire assembly accessible to you. So there is valve body seals on this side. Okay, you want to check to see if your tube seals came out with it. So you have a tube seal here, a tube seal here, and then you have seals here. Okay, the 2-wheel drive versions have additional tube seals in the back for bushing lubrication feed on the slip yoke design. So here are the other 2 tube seals. So the green seal, just stuck on here. It goes in this position, and then the blue tube seal is in this position. And then these just come out, and they're O-rings on the, and that go insert into the valve body, and same with this. All right. So about the valve bodies, they underwent several design and engineering changes over the course of the life cycle from 2011 to 2020. So this is going to be your valve body ID tag. So again, you're matching your numbers here with the numbers on the case. Unfortunately, I don't have them accessible. You also have casting number in this location here. So in fact, let me yank this off real quick. So you have your casting number here, and then you have the year in which this valve body was produced here. Okay, now some of these valve bodies are kind of quirky when it comes to the year of actual production of the casting and the model year unit. So sometimes you have to add 1 year or +1 to whatever this number is to get the model year. This one, it aligns with this vehicle's model year. So here's the ID code. Just put that back. And we'll just put this whole assembly on the tray and take it away. Okay, the solenoids that you saw in the valve body assembly there, they have different band codes. So the concept of banding as it relates to these transmissions is probably best explained by a range of frequencies and amperage, if you will, that solenoid operates in. I explained this to some extent in the 6R80 valve body video, on solenoids, but I'll probably do a dedicated video on these when I go to test them. But the premise is that the solenoid strategy has logic that is designed to engage and disengage or energize or de-energize these solenoids based on the pre-programmed shift strategy. And it uses those banding numbers, if you will, and corresponding frequencies to denote or relate line pressure. So line pressure is ultimately what makes a transmission work. You have line pressure charged to your applied elements when that solenoid is energized or de-energized, it depends. And then when that clutch is commanded off, that line pressure charge ceases and the clutch exhausts. And so you're able to shift gears. If you have major cross leak in a transmission where a specific apply circuit that is supposed to exhaust does not exhaust, then you're going to have a bind up or a tie up. You can also have mechanical bind ups and tie ups as well, and we may or may not see that here in a little bit. All right, there's that speed sensor. We'll go ahead and we'll get rid of it. So torque's 30. This case wants to walk around on me. Alright, like any other transmission, if you have electrical or electronic components, you're always going to replace them. You're never going to reuse them. And the only brands I would trust are the OEM. So, in this case, Ford and or Rostra. Alright, so let's extract the other tube seals here, here, and here. These are all the same length. And then we will also remove our anti-rattle or anti-clunk spring. So this, I'll show you the orientation that the planetary and rear mechanical diode has to be clocked in the case once we go to remove it. But if it's not installed correctly, you'll never be able to get this anti-clunk spring back in. So it just comes out. That screwdriver is marginally too small. There we go. Alright, now what we need to do is I'm going to have the back of the case facing the camera. We'll kind of rearrange the view, and we need to remove the I think it's a 5mm or 6mm Allen plug for the parking pole guide pin. Alright. Actually, I think that's 10mm. Sorry. 10mm. Okay, there's a seal here. A new one will come in the kit. And then just grab your pencil magnet. Lift up a little bit to relieve any tension, and the pin and the pole will come right out. Alright, so what I want to do now is fire up the air compressor, and I want to do an air check. It's always good to do an air check on teardown just because it gives you a sense of what might be happening inside the unit from an applied element perspective, to see if any are either not working or the apply is weak, because it will help you, map symptoms to direct causes. Anytime you're tearing a transmission apart, you always want to see or discover what the direct cause is, somewhere inside the unit that you can directly tie to a drivability symptom that was reported to you by the customer. Otherwise, you're kind of, I don't want to say in the dark, but you don't know for sure, and that gets a little concerning when you go back with it. Now, sometimes you're not going to find the cause or causes, and in those situations, there's a good chance that the cause is not directly associated or inside the transmission, it's outside, like a speed sensor in the transfer case, for example. Alright, you have your cooler line seals here. You can take those out if you want. And then right there, that one ran off. Get it later. Alright, you have your detent roller here, 8mm, and then you have your rooster comb range position and selector shaft assembly. You have your roll pin here. So I like to have it at this angle, and that'll allow me full access to the roll pin. But let me fire up the compressor, we'll do the check, then I'll get rid of that thing, and then we'll start emptying out the case. Okay, I'm ready to go with the air. So we have our circuits labeled. This is direct, this is going to be the forward clutch, and this is going to be overdrive. Okay, direct is basically your 3.5R clutch. So it seems as though this transmission specifically uses the two different nomenclatures. 3.5R, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 2, 6, and low reverse is really GM. Ford uses traditional nomenclature: forward, direct, overdrive, intermediate, and low reverse. And then ZF uses an alpha code to denote each clutch, so E clutch, C clutch, A clutch, B clutch, etc. Alright, so here's a forward clutch, and this is what we suspect is either welded or somehow irreparably damaged. Alright, it is applying and releasing, so interesting. Overdrive, so this is going to be 4, 5, 6. Okay, 4, 5, 6 clutch has bonded pistons, so there's a ply piston and a balance piston. The rest of the pistons in here are all aluminum, except for the balance piston for the forward, that I believe is steel. and I say steel, I believe it. I mean, I guess it could be another metal. Let me try it again. All right. That seems to be working to the extent that you would expect. So now we'll go ahead and we'll do the 2/6 clutch. You can see it apply and release. So that's healthy. I don't see too many issues with the 2/6 clutch in any of these transmissions. The usual suspects that burn up are the 3.5R and the 4.56, especially in the GM units. The 3.5R clutch is really bad about that. And that's just primarily due to the fact that the base welds between the clutch basket and the drum stator always leak. Alright, now I'll do low reverse. So, alright, as you saw, I took the bolt out. I mean, you could put it back in if you want, but you'll notice when I do this without the bolt in there, the whole housing will move. Okay. Alright, I didn't have good contact, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bolt back in. And I may actually have to manipulate the housing to get it aligned. And now we'll do it with the bolt in. Alright, so this is the feed. No air escaping whatsoever. Trigger off the, finger off the trigger. And you see all that air whooshing back out. And the camera got a nice, little burnt transmission fluid shower there. But anyway, the low reverse structure in here, the housing, the piston, everything else, just sits in the back of the case, and this is the only mechanism for which it is secured. So it's not like other transmissions where you have to put air below the piston out, and you have to use a special tool to compress the return spring assembly to remove the snap ring and such. These are not like that. It just comes right out once everything else is out of the way and you have that bolt out of the case. So while you can't see it, the range position switch is more or less unified or synced with the selector shaft rooster comb assembly via a little pin on the detent roller. So in fact, let me get the detent roller out of the way first, and then we'll go ahead and take out the roll pin. So 8mm bolt. Alright. And now at this point you can just wrap out the roll pin. This one wants to drift on me. And like I said, you want it at an angle so that the roll pin is allowed to clear the case. Otherwise it'll get interfered with. And then you just take your selector shaft out. Note there's a seal that goes on the outside, just like this. And then the rooster comb assembly with your range position switch just comes out. So here is the detent roller, and see the pin that engages the switch, just like that. That's how the switch knows where you are in your detent, what range position has been selected, so that it can inform the powertrain control module of that. Alright, those seals come in the kit just like all the others. now we're in a position to remove stuff. Let's get this filter out of the way. Alright, so what I do here, and pretty much everybody does, is just take a pry bar and you're just going to wedge the pump forward until it comes out. Okay, pump's very heavy, be careful. Alright, so there were two different pumps to my knowledge. There was your PTO pump and your non-PTO pump. Okay, your non-PTO pumps all have a void here between the pump housing and the stator support. Okay, this is a three-piece pump. You have the stator support is one piece. You have the pump housing, which is this aluminum, big section here. And then you have your pump body, which is bolted to the pump housing here. So the gear set is inside the pump body and works against the working surface in the pump housing, and then the stator distributes apply oil to the front three clutch packs that we just air tested. Okay, here is your selective spacer. These are color coded. See how thick this is? I'll flash a chart on the screen with the different thicknesses. I don't know them by heart. Alright, let's see if this will focus on for us. Okay, this looks like a 215 thousandths thick. Alright, you got your 3 Teflon sealing rings. You need a sizing tool. There's an expander and a sizer. It comes in a set, and they're made by Adaptacase, and they're very, very expensive. OTC also makes the the Ford OEM dealership tool version. You can find those on eBay. Adaptacase is usually available either on Amazon, eBay, and then any transmission parts supplier distributor should have the ability to get them for you as well. Okay, we'll deal with these later, separate them. I'll show you a trick on how to easily separate the stator from the pump housing. But for now, I'm just going to move this to the back of the bench so we can get everything else out of the way, or out of the case rather. Alright, let me get this case so it's oriented and facing you, and we'll adjust the camera as well. In fact, I'll push the case back over here, and we're just going to move the camera. That's a lot easier. Okay, I think we're in good position. Now let's go ahead and take out the front drum and hub complex. Again, this is very, very heavy, much more so than a regular transmission, so just be real careful. The main thing you want to avoid doing here is dropping or banging the 3.5R clutch drum. It is somewhat delicate. It can bend and or even break, dent, warp, whatever, if it's banged. And that's assuming it'll come out. There we go. Alright, hopefully that'll give you an appreciation of how heavy this is. So you're going to have your bearing here. There's 2 of these style bearings with the ears. This is the front of the 2, the other one's in the back of the case, and it goes to the center support right here. So I'm going to leave it in there so when we pull the center support out, you get to see the orientation. So I'm going to just roll this to the back of the bench. It's going to collide with the wrenches and stay there for now. Okay, so now we have the center support with the gigantic snap ring. The snap ring's beveled, and the beveled side faces the mouth of the case, or faces front. Alright, so I'm going to try to do this so that you can see what I'm doing. So I may have to orient the case a little bit differently. Okay, All right, so you want to search for the ends of the snap ring. This is going to be the 6 o'clock position right here. This is the case belly. Okay, so the two ends are right here. So they're going to be at roughly the 12 o'clock position or straddling the 12 o'clock position. All right, so if you're wondering who makes these pliers, I mean, if you're a fabricator or you know a fabricator, you can have them made, but these are made by a company called PRTC, and that's their contact info. They're in Utah. Okay, that's 9608, the last four digits, 801-373-9608. Okay, these pliers are awesome. I mean, they make quick and safe work of these kind of snap rings. Alright, so what I try to do is come in at a pitched angle like this and get on both ends. Got to engage both ends. Grab up and pull forward. And then just release it on the bench like that so that you don't injure yourself. If this thing comes flying, hits you in the face, it's going to suck. Alright, now that that's out of the way, we can go ahead and remove the center support. Alright, it may be helpful to kind of pry into the back of the, in the area of the diode, between the diode and the center support, just to give you some space, or you can just simply try and take it out. Alright, I should mention there are two keepers or alignment dowels, but they're rectangular, they're not dowels per se. I don't know, there's a correct term for them, I don't know offhand what it is, but it's escaping me at the moment. But this is what I'm referring to. Got one here and one here. Okay, sometimes they fall out, and if they fall out and kind of wedge themselves, then it's going to be tricky to get this thing out. That happened to me a couple of times, but usually they just come right out. There's that bearing. That's how it sits. And then you have your keepers, so we'll deal with that later. Okay, you're also going to have another bearing and a race. Okay. This goes like this on the back of the support. And this race is cracked. So at minimum we'll need a new race or selective spacer. So there's the bearing. Okay, that doesn't go there. Okay, in the case, in the rear of the center support, you're going to have what's called an anti-fretting ring. Alright, don't forget to reinstall that when you go back with it. Alright, now you're going to have your rear planet and one-way diode assembly. So let me zoom in so you can see the orientation of things. Alright, so what you're looking at is the rear gear set. So you have your mechanical diode here, you have your front sun gear, and then behind it is the rearward sun gear in this planetary carrier set. Planetary carrier set itself, and then behind it is the low reverse clutch pack and the ring gear output shaft assembly. So this planet underwent a design change. Okay, the planets that were made, and I'll have to annotate the year, I think it's 2015 or 2016, prior to that year had a what's called a needle bearing and seal support structure. So in other words, it was circular. You notice how this has an eccentric shape. It looks like a 6R80 plant, just much bigger. Ford realized that they didn't need that, that seal support or bearing support in there, and so they got rid of it. All right, the other thing I want to make sure I point out here is the clocking of the wide lugs. So you have a wide lug here, a wide lug here, a wide lug here. Okay, 1, 2, 3. This wide lug here is roughly at the 7 o'clock position relative to the bottom center line of the case, which we refer to as 6 o'clock. So when you go back with it, it must be in this exact orientation. So if you want, I mean, you don't need to do this, but if you want, you could take a scribe and you can scribe the lugs. I mean, I'm just doing it for shits and giggles. But you can scribe those lugs and you'll know exactly where to put that wide lug there. Like I said, it's a 7 o'clock position. Alright, so let's pull out our sun gears first so that they don't get damaged. So here are 2 sun gears. Alright, you got the forward and the rearward sun gear. Alright, I'm always forgetting to zoom back out. So you have a race and you have an axial bearing. Okay, the axial bearing has a little seat to locate itself on the rear sun gear. Okay, and then on the other side of the sun gear, the rearward facing side faces another bearing in the planet. So just like this. Okay, we'll put these away. Alright, now the planet is very heavy, so be careful with it. So now you have a better look at it. There's your bearing. The diode will spin counterclockwise and lock clockwise. So you can remove this snap ring to service the diode elements or replace it, but whatever you do, make sure that the diode assembly itself is supported, because if not, it's going to drop and all these stupid little elements are going to go all over the place, and at that point you're replacing the whole thing. I mean, unless you like tedious work, which I hate. So in many cases, if either this is bad or the planet is bad, the whole thing gets replaced as one unified assembly. So this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is considered a commercial planet. This planet is considered a standard planet. Okay, same diode assembly. This is out of a 2014 or 2013 6R140 core that was installed behind a Boss 6.2 engine in F450 350 truck or something. But same configuration with sun gears. However, as you can see, it has a different planetary setup than does this one. This has 4 pinions. This one here that came out of this unit is considered to be much stronger. So if we end up having to replace this, which at first glance I don't think we will, but if we end up having to, we'll have to get another one just like it. Okay, low reverse frictions. So frictions and steels, and then a cushion plate and a backing plate. So you have, see, this has 4 and 4. So steel, friction, steel friction, steel friction, and so forth. And then you have your backing plate and your cushion plate. So alright, that's how the clutch pack went. Alright, output ring gear and low reverse piston housing is it. And I dinged it. Here it is. And you have your bearing. This is affixed to the ring gear. So you want to check it, make sure it's good. Alright, same with the threads. I mean, we already looked at those. And then lastly, the low reverse piston housing assembly. So, as I was mentioning earlier, these just come out of the case once you remove that bolt. These just come out. Okay, so you have your snap ring. Here are the ends right here at the 3 o'clock position relative to the way I'm holding it. So this goes on a obviously a clutch spring compressor. Maybe it's a foot press, maybe it's something else on a shop press, but that's how you would get it out, with snap ring pliers. Alright, in the case itself, at the back, you have your 2 needle bearing assemblies. Those are in place of a rear case bushing or bushings. Transmissions this big and heavy, bushings are not ideal because they can overheat. When it comes to the back of the case. So let me go ahead and get this thing upright and then we'll look at those real quick. I just want to empty some of the fluid out. Alright, I think I have a good view of the needle bearing assemblies here. So these don't have to be replaced unless there's a reason to replace them, but if you're going to replace one, you're going to replace both. So just kind of rotate them in place, make sure all of the little needle bearings are captured and remaining in their respective positions. Make sure they're not damaged, burnt, scored, or otherwise deemed not serviceable visually and physically. Okay, we're rotating the outboard bearing first. Alright, now we'll go ahead and do the same, the inboard bearing. Okay, and it looks like one of the needles has fallen. So the inboard bearing assembly is no good. See if anything else falls out. Okay, let me see if I can get you a little bit closer, zoom you in, and you should be able to see the empty spot right there where this little needle came from. Right there. So we'll go ahead and put 2 cage needle bearing assemblies in the back of the case. During reassembly, it'll be the first thing we do actually when we go back with it, and we'll do it with the case just on the ground, inverted. Alright, let me get this thing out of the way so we can start going through these sub-assemblies and finish up with a summation. Alright, got the bench kind of cleaned off, so now we're going to go ahead and disassemble, inspect all the interior case components, and I like to work backwards to front when it comes to the order that I take stuff apart in. So begin with the low reverse, and I mean, look how massive this thing is. It's gigantic. For comparison's sake, on the left is a low reverse apply piston for a C6 or E4OD or 4100. I mean, it's like comparing the Earth to the moon. And this easily fits inside with plenty of room to spare. Just another way of visualizing and showing the scale and size difference between these transmissions and pretty much every other transmission out there. I mean, the Allison LCT 1000s are kind of on par with these, but I mean, these things are just gigantic. So anyway, you're gonna have a bearing here, as you can see. Okay, it's just gonna sit in the pocket. This is that second two-eared bearing that I was mentioning earlier, the first being the one on the center support. So just make sure this is in good shape. You can order a bearing kit or individually from Ford. You know, bearing kits, I believe, are available in the aftermarket. If you're going to order anything from the dealership, it's going to be all individual. The dealership doesn't bundle things and put things in kits like the aftermarket does, so just be aware of that if you're not already. And you'll want to have your VIN number handy. I mean, everything is based on the VIN. They look the VIN up and then they, know immediately what parts you need in the computer system. All right, so we're going to go to the press to take this off. I am able to get these off on the foot press. It's just kind of tedious because the the width of the two press arms is pretty much maxed out when this is in there. So we'll see how I do. Worst case, I'll just go to the shop press and deal with it there. Okay, so we're working at the very limits of my foot press here in terms of the width of the bar. So I'm going to see if I can get it out. Sometimes I can, sometimes I just, it just doesn't work and I have to take it to the press, the shop press, but we'll see. I'll have to move this back just a little bit so I can get my foot onto the pedal, and then I should be able to at least get it compressed. But like I said, it may or may not work. So try to center it up as much as you can. All right. And then I'll just kind of take my hands, make sure that I can keep these legs or levers applied, and then I'm going to just put as much weight as I can on and spread this thing out. And the trick is to get it beyond the locking bosses. Once you've done that, you should be able to relax tension on it and allow it to kind of float upward and out. But like I said, it's not wanting to come out. Alright, here we go. So like I said, very limits of what this little foot press is capable of. But that's how you do it in a way that it doesn't damage anything. So this is one unified assembly, just like that. So let's go back to the main bench and we'll take the piston itself out of the housing. Alright, best way to do this is with shop air. So you just have to get it disengaged and then just kind of work it free. And that's it. So you have a sealing ring or seal here. These are like D-cut seals, and two here. So I say this in a lot of my videos, I'll say it here. If you're not intimately familiar with all the different sizes of seals, and they all look very similar, just keep the seals on each of their respective workpieces until you're ready to actually start the reassembly process. And then just take them off individually and compare all the seals in the kit to what you took off of whatever part. And that'll help you dramatically reduce the risk that you put the incorrect seal in the wrong location. So you're not going to damage the seals if you put it in the hot tank. I mean, you're not going to fall apart on you or anything like that, as long as they're not in there like all day or something. You really only need like a half hour at most with aluminum. Ferrous metal, maybe a little bit longer, but you could also power wash these things with just a pressure washer too, and that'll get them nice and clean. Same with the assemblies, for the return springs. Alright, now we'll take a much closer look at the output shaft ring gear, parking gear assembly. So again, we have our bearing. This feels perfect. When it comes to bushings in these transmissions, they're a little bit different in terms of the guidance that ATSG gives you, where they have you replace all the bushings, I replace all the bushings, but if the bushings are in good shape and they check good, in other words, the clearance between whatever journal and the bushing is 1/1000th of an inch all the way around or less, and it spins free, and there's no obvious signs of damage or, you know, acute wear, then you can reuse them. Okay. If they are worn and you have noticeable side play, you know, when you take whatever workpiece goes in here, in this case it's going to be that intermediate shaft. If there's play here, then you'll want to replace this bushing. So, and I do not do this when they're dirty. Okay. I may do a separate video on bushing inspection for this transmission, but for now, suffice to say, I could see, you know, wear even all the way across the bench on that Pilot. So this bushing is going to have to be changed out. All right, let's look at the teeth. You want to make sure that they're not fractured. You see something right there, for example. This may or may not be the end of the world, but I'll be honest, the teeth look a little worn to me. Okay, check your journal here where your needle bearings go. Okay, it should not be signs of overheating or bluing or scoring or anything like that. Check your parking lugs. Okay, the whole structure needs to be reviewed for cracks, any kind of damage like that. You want to critically inspect these threads and these splines. So like I said, when parts are dirty is not the time you want to do your inspection. You actually want to do them when parts are clean. So I'm just going to show you what to look at, but I'm not actually going to inspect this thing for real and all these parts until they're all cleaned off. All right, let's bring our planet. All right, so you want to check this bearing. Make sure it's in good shape, it's captured. So you'd have to disassemble this whole thing to get at it. Check your lugs on your diode. Okay, counterclockwise rotation, locks clockwise. All right, all your pinions. Make sure that the gears are not loose on them. In other words, no side play. Check vertical play. There is a spec. I'll flash it on the screen. These appear to be okay. So when it comes to cleaning planets, whatever you do, do not be tempted to try and spray them down with brake cleaner or some other solvent and zip them with compressed air, because that's a great way to damage the little needle bearings inside of each pinion gear. So what I typically will do, and you know, you can, I guess, do something different if you'd like, but all I really do is wipe them down. This one, I mean, it's going to stink because the fluid stinks, and when it goes back in, it's still going to stink. But, you know, it is what it is, because otherwise you're either going to replace the planet or you're going to have to clean it very, very carefully. All right, looks like we got a refugee here, or a stowaway. So the rest of the clutch pack is outside, but this friction is representative of the rest of them and looks fine. Like I said, I don't see too many issues with low reverse, unless a lot of burnouts are being done in, you know, manual. Wondering where that one friction was. It was stuck on the underside of the diode. So check your base plate, check the splines here as well. Check around here. What you're looking for are cracks, signs of any kind of stress. You know, anything that would lead you to believe that this planet should not go back in. That's really what you're after. And be careful with it. Like I said, it's very heavy. If you do a lot of 6R140s, you will get very strong. It is a great workout. especially for your upper body. You can get arms in. I mean, you can do curls with that thing. You can kind of, you know, do some like leg lifts or cowbells or something with this. Just have to be careful with it, that's all. I'm obviously kidding. I wouldn't do kettlebell exercises with the Planet lest you allow it to fly out of your hands. Okay, oops, sorry about that. Let me change out my battery and then we'll proceed. Alright, so you have your sun gears, your front and your rear that are associated with the rear Planet assembly. So, your race, your gear, and then you want to check basically the same things as you did with the Planetary. Look at splines, make sure these splines are in good shape. Check wear on the teeth. These look a little worn to me. You're looking for pitting, chipping, fracturing, anything else would lead you to believe that this gear might fail when it goes back. Same with the rear. See, like, I can't tell if I'm seeing pitting or if that's just fluid bubbling, and it looks like little tiny bubbles in the fluid. And that's why I don't like to inspect stuff when it's dirty. So, put the bearings over here, and then we're going to take these and wash them. Alright, our 2/6 clutch. So we have our threading ring, or anti-threading ring I should say. And then we have the other bearing associated with the Planet, and then this is the front 2-eared bearing, and that goes just like this. So this goes like so. Back here, I'll get the Planet back out here, or over here I should say. I'm in sun gear. Just like that. Sun gear, Planet, ring gear. I know I shouldn't be, but I'm using the terms interchangeably. Get that threading ring out of the way. Alright, I'm going to have one hell of an editing job ahead of me once I'm done filming. That's because I'm a poor videographer. I will never win awards for cinematography. It will never happen. Okay, so you will have selective snap rings in the following clutch packs. The 2/6 clutch, the 456 clutch / overdrive clutch. This is also known as the intermediate clutch. The 35R clutch, aka direct clutch, and the 1234 clutch, aka the forward clutch. The 2/6 snap ring and the forward clutch snap ring are the same snap ring. The 35R / direct is different, as is the 456. Alright, visually the 456 is obviously much smaller, but at a glance you might possibly could mistake one of these for the direct, but you won't install it by mistake. When you go to try, it'll be readily obvious that something is not right. I'll flash all the clearances on the screen as we go through them, but okay, 30 to 40 thousandths is generally what you manage to. This is on the high side of spec. So whenever you go back with one of these units, or frankly any clutch-to-clutch transmission, 6 speeds, 8 speeds, 10 speeds and such, you want to always install a full steel module, okay, in addition to a clutch module. The reason being is that in my experience, these steels, the flat steels, wear just like frictions do. And you may have 1 to 2 thousandths of wear across the clutch pack. So 1 to 2 thousandths sound like much until you multiply it by 5 flat steels, then it becomes 10 thousandths. So you're already giving up 10 thousandths of an inch in terms of clearance relative to spec. And chances are, if that's the case, you're either going to be on the very high side of spec, which you don't want to be, or you're going to be out of spec on the high side. And if you're already using the thickest snap ring available, and I'll flash a chart showing all the different snap rings that Ford provides for dialing in your clearance, then you're going to kind of be assed out. You absolutely do not want to be out of spec with these transmissions, any of these clutch packs, period. So this is the stack up, pretty straightforward deal. So you got a cushion plate, a flat steel, friction disc, flat, friction, flat, and so forth for your intermediate clutch. All right, let's see how thick this particular snap ring is. Looks like it's 134 thousandths. Okay, so what we have here retaining the Belleville style plate is 2 clamshell style keepers. This is a ZF thing, so if you're familiar with ZF transmissions in general, this is how they retain the Belleville plate holding the ply piston in place. So just like that. Alright, let's go to the foot press so we can take it out. I'm sorry, the shop press. I use the shop press for this. Okay, we have everything set up the way we want it. We have the Belleville spring collapsed so that we freed up tension on the 2 keepers. Just take your magnet and just extract them out of the way. This one wants to fight me. There we go. All right, relax tension. All right. These 2 pieces of press tooling are not important. I mean, you could use whatever. But if you're looking for this one, it's fairly common to see it on eBay. It's Ken Moore DT47867, and I use this on so many different transmissions. It's a more or less a universal clutch spring compressor, and despite what I'm showing you, it is adjustable. There we go. This one's, I don't know, a little stubborn, but you can adjust it to larger and smaller diameters. I have another one on the way, and if you watch the reassembly series on this transmission, you'll see me using a different one that's much larger. All right, back to the bench. All right, you can replace these if you want. I generally do. That's why I'm not, paying a whole bunch of attention to it. So just go ahead and turn the housing itself upside down, put air in the intermediate feed, and pop the piston out. So always check your sealing surfaces, make sure that they're not scored up. If there's catastrophic failure inside the unit, a lot of times tiny pieces of metal and whatnot will get up in there and score it real bad to the point where you have to replace it. You have your 2 D-cut seals here. And like I said, just keep them on the piston, you know, through the cleaning cycle, so you know exactly which ones go where. All right, away with this thing. All right, now what we're gonna do is set up the pump on the far end of the bench so that we can then take out the hubs, get them out of the way of that thing, and then we're gonna drop the entire front clutch pack complex onto the pump so that we can do some additional air checks and assess clearance. I also like to have the pump together so that I can use it to force out pistons. All right, let's roll this thing over. And like I said, you definitely want to be careful with it. So here is your 3.5R clutch hub. The 1234 hub is interior to this. That's this thing here. And then you have your 456 along with your shaft. And then, like I said, it's visually apparent that there was some sort of lubrication issue there. There was hard contact between the bushing and that journal. So if I can't clean that up with sandpaper, then we're going to replace it. So unlike the 6R80s that use a very specialized kind of snap ring, this is just a standard generic deal. It just can be a pain in the ass to get out sometimes, especially if you're trying to film a video. Then it's absolutely going to fight you. It will engage in no holds barred combat, trying to thwart your every move. Okay, this is 151 thousandths. Get these 2.6 clutches out of the way. Alright, so now everything will come out. So your 3.5R clutch, your direct clutch, which these are obviously burnt, is retained with little tabs. So there is a tab here, a tab here. Alright, and then there's a bearing here. So note the wear here on the lugs. I mean, this is very common. What you can do, if you're concerned, is just smooth these out a little bit with emery cloth. If they're real bad, you'll want to replace the hub. So you have the part number here. I don't know if you can see that. Alright, let's have a look at this clutch pack. So how many frictions are in here? 4? There used to be 5. The direct clutch changed. I'll have to annotate the video with the year, but what they did was increase the thickness of the frictions to decrease the count. So these got a bit toasty. Again, when you're stuck in the mud or the sand, you're trying to get out, a whole boatload of heat gets introduced, and things just start to break down. This actually might be from normal slipping, since combination of normal slipping, just regular heavy duty use, and then probably trying to reverse out of their situation as well. These are on in reverse. All right, let's see what this backing plate. I'm probably going to replace it. It looks fried. When you have a lot of heat sustain like this, and the backing plate gets discolored, it's a good bet that it's also warped, even if slightly. And if that becomes the case, then I would just replace it if I were you. Okay, here is your bearing for your 1, 2, 3, 4 hub. And then this and the 4, 5, 6 hub will come out. So you also have a bearing on the interior, just like this. This bearing goes on the hub for your overdrives or 4, 5, 6 clutch. Okay, these can be weak and they will fracture, so this will become independent of this. And when that occurs, you will not have any 4, 5, or 6. So no 3, 4 upshift or neutral in 4th. If it occurs while you're in 5th or 6th gear, then you'll have a neutral condition. It will feel like you're in neutral until the vehicle has slowed enough to where it will mechanically downshift back to 3rd gear, and then that's it. You won't be able to, achieve any other gears beyond 3rd. So the hub is dirty, but check it. And I'll obviously scrutinize it more thoroughly, but you want to make sure that no splines are twisted. Worn or twisted splines will occur if you have just a boatload of torque going through it, big horsepower or big torque motor, diesel 6.7. A lot of guys will run tuning, and especially off-road tuning, and they'll race these things or do tug of wars and shit, and that will bend up splines and break parts of all manner and description, and the end is very violent. So always be on the lookout for that stuff. I might be able to clean that up with sandpaper. I can't feel this. I can see it, but I can't feel it. So that bushing, as I mentioned earlier, will have to be changed out. Okay, check the lugs here for any unusual wear, cracking, fractures. Like I said, I don't want to say it's common, because that's not true, but I've seen it enough to know that it is a concern and something you want to be on the lookout for. Okay, bushings. If you're going to buy bushings for these, here's my recommendation. I buy them from Ford individually. I've had some issues with aftermarket bushings being out of spec, and so I would buy the bushings from Ford Motor Company directly. Just go to the dealer with your VIN and let them know what bushings you need, and they'll bring up like a diagram, and they'll, you could just point to it, and it'll have a number, and then that's the number that they'll order for you, that whatever that ID number is. Okay, now you should be able to pull out the overdrive drum. You got your front planet, and then here is your bearing. Goes right here. All right, we're not going to take that apart yet. I want to put some fluid in here. We're going to do a pressure test of this drum. Occasionally these are, I don't want to say, again, not necessarily common, but they can leak at the base where this is, pressed into the clutch basket. We'll move that aside for now. Okay, here is our 3.5R clutch drum. So this was the suspect clutch. So you're going to have your 3.5R ply ring. This just comes out. As you can see, it's got evidence of catastrophic meltdown that had occurred or has occurred in this unit. So this thing saw a lot of heat. I'm inclined to replace it. And then here is your 1, 2, 3, 4 clutch snap ring. So unlike the GM units 6L80 and 90, there are no contiguous lugs that you got to be mindful of when reinstalling your clutch snap rings. In the GM transmissions, there'll be one lug on each clutch pack, on the basket here, that has no snap ring groove. And so you want to put the two ends of the snap ring on either side of it. But like I said, that's not an issue here. All right, we already baked in the price to replace this drum, so I'm not too concerned about it. But this planet will be scrutinized heavily to make sure it's not damaged. All right, let's see what we got here for R. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like 140 thousandths is the thickness.
Alright, we're going to be into it for a backing plate. There's no way in hell I would put something like this back in. This thing is scorched. It will probably fracture and break apart if it were to be reused. And looks like my shop customer, shop tech, he was spot on in his diagnosis. I mean, we have crispy critters up in here. Alright, let me get this out. Alright, this used to be a cushion plate. And this used to be a flat steel. It is now waved. And this used to be a clutch pack that was functioning, but is no longer. Alright, hopefully the damage is limited to this. So, backing plate, T5R ply ring, and this stuff gets replaced automatically, other than the cushion plate, which you just put another one in there. Good used. Here's our bearing. Alright, so when it comes to this planet and its orientation inside of the balance piston, you have to index the location here where you see the two identification dots. Okay, you want to index on the balance piston so that they go back in the exact same, placement. Okay, there's a small snap ring right there. So I'm going to do that, then I'm going to go ahead and get the snap ring out, and then we'll proceed with this assembly. The only other wrinkle with this drum is removing the 3/4 applying balance pistons. And there's a certain way you have to do that, which I'll show you once we get to that point. But first I have to locate my scribe. I don't know what the hell I did with it. Alright, found it. It was over by the shop press. Alright, so here's what I do. I will put an indexing mark to the immediate right lug like this of the dot. So I know when I'm looking at it like this, like you see it here, this dot is to the northwest, if you will, or upper left of the scribed or marked lug. I mean, you could do it however you'd like, as long as it goes back in the same place. That's really all that matters. So I just try to make kind of like an X, just a whole bunch of scoring so that it's obvious as to, would lugs have to be kind of aligned with these dots. And it's not going to hurt the piston or anything like that. It's just something that you have to do. Now with the 6R80s, they're a little bit more cumbersome because the planet is retained by an internal snap ring, and there's actual retention tabs as part of the structure that it docks with. So if you watch my 6R80 video series at all, teardown, inspection, or reassembly, you'll see me kind of wrestle with that and perform the whole procedure to get that thing out and then put it back in. And I actually didn't index it initially, so I had to kind of retrace my steps and get it back home where it needed to be. Alright, so this should just come right out. Alright, there we go. For a split second I was like, oh no, it's stuck in there. So we have 5 pinions. It's our sun gear. Okay, and your selective spacer sits in this little recess right here. And you have your captured bearing. So 5 pinions, check them. Looks like we see some wear, or maybe that's fluid. Let's see. Yeah, that was fluid. Like I said, that's why it's very tricky to to inspect these. When it comes to the planets, I usually inspect them as I'm cleaning them, and that's not happening right now. Okay, this one's making a lot of noise, and it's loose. In fact, I can feel the whole frame. Like when I'm doing this, and I know you can't feel anything, obviously, but I could feel in this structure it moving. Now there is the bearing here, you know, this one, but it's more than just that. And look how loose that is. So he's going to need a planet. I'm not putting that back in. Okay, so now we have our 1, 2, 3, 4 balance piston and apply piston. Then underneath we have the 3.5R balance piston, and way at the bottom there you maybe can see it with the channel going all the way around. That's the 3.5R apply piston. So let's go to the press. We'll take out the 1, 2, 3, 4 piston set. We'll look at those and then we'll do the same. And like I said, I'll show you what you have to do to get the 3.5R stuff out. Those 2 pistons, there's a certain way you have to do it. It's not like a traditional snap ring. All right, so once again I have my compressor installed, and the opening in the snap ring is actually way back here. Don't ask me why, I just misplaced it, but I figure I still have access, so let's give it a go. All right, it's free. Just release tension slowly. Get that stuff out of the way. All right, back to the bench. Okay, now what you're going to do is situate the drum on the pump assembly, and this is why I like to do the pump last. Go ahead and insert or charge the forward circuit with air, and out comes the piston. So there it is. Nasty ass fluid. Return spring assembly. This is going to look identical to the one for the 3.5R, except that this is smaller diameter, so you won't be able to mix them up. And then our apply piston. More nasty ass fluid. Stinks. Unlike the GM pistons, especially the earlier model units, I've not heard of instances where the forward or 1, 2, 3, 4 piston in these units is prone to cracking. It's just not something I've come across, but the GM 6L80s, 90s, especially the pre-2012 units, it was like a chronic issue. So you're working on one of them. Always install the Sonic's billet forward piston, or 1, 2, 3, 4 piston rather, regardless of what year it is, but these don't seem to have that same hang up. Okay, now we're going to go back to the press, and what we're going to do is we're going to need to compress this piston until we can get 2 screwdrivers in place on either side of this retaining snap ring. This snap ring is a little bit different. The method of retention is a little bit different in that this is an internal snap ring that's designed to put pressure outward to retain the piston set. Okay, everything else, the piston is retained with the snap ring where the pressure is coming from up underneath. But in this case, this snap ring, the pressure is mostly outward like this. So what we do is we compress the snap ring, or excuse me, compress the piston until we can push that snap ring inboard in toward its, you know, the interior of its groove. And then once we hear it kind of pop, we'll release tension on the press, and it should just come right up to the point where we can blow air and pop these pistons out of here. All right, back to the press. Okay, so we have the 2 screwdrivers in place. All right, now what I'm going to try to do is release tension while that snap ring is collapsed inboard, you know, into its groove, and see if I can allow this piston to release. Alright, so I have the screwdrivers in position, so what I'm now going to try to do is release the piston by kind of forcing the snap ring inboard into its groove so that it will allow the piston complex to bypass it. Alright, so when I release tension, it should free it. Alright, and that's that pop that you're looking for. And yes, press tooling sometimes goes all over the place. Okay, so now that it's kind of popped, we're going to try and force it the rest of the way out with shop air when it's on the pump. Alright, air into the direct clutch feed. Put a whole bunch. And it might have actually popped out too far to allow for air. So when that happens, just kind of tap on it. And I'm tapping on the snap ring, not the piston. So you can see, you know, where I had my screwdrivers. I mean, it makes some boo-boos, but nothing catastrophic or even damaging. So here is your return spring assembly. So, as you can see, it's markedly larger than the Ford return spring assembly, so you won't mix them up. Alright, let me grab that apply piston. It's time to use common sense. Grab another set of needle nose. Nasty fluid. Seems supple, a little weak from overheating. It's possible that the piston just simply launched itself once I cleared the balance piston and the snap ring, that it was just not able to apply, but either way, direct frictions were heavily stressed. that is normal in these transmissions. Direct is very vulnerable in all of them. I mean, all the ZF based units. Yummy, yummy. All right. Now that the direct clutch is empty, we only have 2 more sub-assemblies. The overdrive pack and the pump itself. So let me reposition the camera. Alright, so what I want to do is ascertain whether or not we have any leaks here where the shaft is mated to the drum. So I'm looking for bubbles that might appear here right at the joint, if you could see it. I don't know if you can, but there's a joint right here you can see where it's pressed. Alright, so air into the 456 feed. Plug this hole, and what I'm looking for is bubbles. Back here, hang on. I realize the camera angle kind of sucks for what I'm trying to show you. Alright, it's a little better. Okay, let's see if we can spot bubbles anywhere in that fluid. So this clutch appears healthy, but like I said, 456 and 35R are both very vulnerable in all these transmissions. So unit comes in, it's almost guaranteed that at least one of them will be smoked or heavily stressed. I don't see bubbles. It will be tested again on reassembly, but that's just because I want to make absolutely sure nothing's bad's going out the door. I should say before reassembly, I clean everything off, I'll load it up, and then I'll test it again before the final assembly. Absolutely disgusting. Alright, let's now focus on the 456 and see what that clutch pack looks like. Alright, we got guys doing landscaping work, so apologize for the noise. Okay, this is selective, the snap ring. Let's find out what the size is, or the thickness I should say. It appears to be 97 thousandths. So we're going to do some sort of max pack in this overdrive clutch. I'm not exactly sure yet what's going to go in here, but that's the plan. So it looks like the 456 clutch is healthy. Okay, it is unmarred, undamaged. So there is no cushion plate in here. You have your bottom steel, friction, and then steel friction, and so forth. So, see, that's got 7 frictions and looks like 4, 7, 6, no, 7 and 7. Sorry, 7 and 7. Okay, we have 7 flat steels, 7 friction discs, and a backing plate. All right, this is a traditional snap ring. So to the foot press, get it out, and then we'll look at these pistons. All overhauls will get new apply and balance pistons for the 456. Never reuse this kind of stuff. It's considered a consumable. So, as I mentioned earlier, this bushing will need to be changed. Okay, floor is a little bit slippery. Some of this transmission fluid that you can go ahead and remove them now. Alright, so you have a traditional return spring assembly here as opposed to a Belleville style plate. So, balance piston, return spring, you know, this side facing up, and then you have your apply piston. So you can check the surfaces. You would expect these to be nice and supple, which they are, given the condition of the clutch pack. So, good deal, at least with respect to the 456. So you want to check your journal in here. Make sure there's no scoring, sealing surfaces, check splines. Like I mentioned, check the bushing, do that pressure test procedure that I showed you just a little bit ago. Some of this nasty fluid drain into the trough. All right, now we're going to go ahead and deal with the pump. All right, last but not least, we have the pump. So I got all the other parts back on the bench, so when we do our summary, you know, we can refer to them. But pump is held together by a mixture of short and long bolts. So you have the stator support bolted to the pump housing, and the pump housing is going to also contain the pump body. So as I mentioned earlier, the 3 parts are the stator and stator support, which is one part, the pump housing, that takes a big O-ring here, and then the pump body, which is this part here, where the gears are at. That's where the gears are located. Okay, the pump housing is going to be hard and fast to the stator support, so there's a certain way I break them loose. But first we'll go ahead and we'll start removing the bolts slowly so you can see exactly where each bolt goes. So we have a long bolt, another long bolt, a short bolt, another long bolt, a short bolt, a long bolt, a short bolt, a long bolt, a short bolt, long bolt, short bolt, and long bolt. Okay, so now we have to separate the stator support from the pump housing and pump body. So in the ATSG manual, they show you using a pry bar to pry against the PTO gear that would otherwise be here, but you know, we don't have that luxury. In fact, most of these transmissions are not PTO transmissions, so you're going to have to do something else. And what I like to do is take a long pry bar, and I'll come in here just like this, and I'll kind of gently force upward on it, or alternatively smack down on it like this. Okay, it's not going to hurt anything. I mean, it sounds kind of violent, but it gets the job done. All right, so have your metal spacer. It's going to go just like this, and then you're going to have your stator and stator support assembly. You got a Teflon sealing ring here and an O-ring here. So you want to check this for any kind of signs of wear, warpage, or overheating. When this is cleaned up, you can take a straight edge over it. Make sure that you cannot see any daylight poking out underneath that precision straight edge. You obviously using a flashlight. So, and then for your pump housing and your pump body, what you're going to want to do is grab two long pump bolts and just simply thread them in. So these are going to go into the pump body. And then have your mallet handy. And then I'll just take it like this. And this will pop it out. Checking the camera angle to make sure that it was in the frame. If it wasn't, I'd be pissed. I would be pissed. So you're going to check this working surface here. This is scored up pretty bad. I feel it. Even with these thick ass gloves. That's not good. Okay, so note the orientation of the gears. You have your dots, they're facing up. And you have the offset that faces front. So you have the spline portion and then the unsplined portion. The unsplined portion faces to the seal. Alright, you would normally inspect these gears for signs of wear, fracturing. Inspect the splines, make sure that they're not worn. You know, all your usual checks that you would do. Okay, this thing, I mean, the body here looks pretty good, but the housing is scored up. This is where you really want to focus your visual inspection and to some extent physical inspection as well, and that is the crescent. And that's true of all crescent style pumps. The crescent is usually the area that, if sufficiently worn, will condemn the pump to either being replaced or being remachined. And I don't know if my machinist actually machines these pumps, but there are good used pumps available, as well as remanned pumps. And it's just the pump body, or you can buy the whole assembly. The whole assembly is obviously very expensive, but you can buy the body with the gears. So there's 3 different measurements you need to take when it comes to assessing pump gear clearance. So I'll flash them on the screen as far as what the standards or the benchmarks are. But basically, you measure your deck surface to the face of each gear, the clearance between the outer diameter of the driven gear and the inner diameter of the pump body bore, and then the spacing between the teeth. So we're not going to do that now because this thing is filthy, but that's how you would measure it. So I believe the spec is between a half a thou and 1 thou for deck surface clearance, but I'll have to check. I'm not 100% sure by memory what the other two specs are. But yeah, we have gross physical wear right here. And so see your alignment pin here, that goes here. And you have suction and you have pressure, and they just, you know, align like that. So, all right. All right, got all the parts, including the case back in front of us. So just kind of summarize real quick. Not as much damage as I thought, to be honest. I was thinking that, you know, we were looking at a full grenade job, but it will need some additional hard parts beyond that 3.5R drum that we originally speculated on. My shop tech customer was spot on in his diagnosis. The forward clutch was welded, and for all automatic transmissions, you know, whenever you weld the forward clutch, you will want to move forward and park neutral and bind in reverse. It's pretty standard, but you know, unless you know transmissions, which he does, you may or may not reach that diagnosis without tearing it apart. So good on him for that. So it will need a couple of backing plates, one for the 1234 clutch, another for the 3.5R clutch. Both of those are just smoked. I'm not going to reuse them. It's going to need a front planet. It may also need the corresponding sun gear. I don't know. I have to look at it a little more closely once everything's cleaned off. It's going to need a pump housing, or that one's going to need to be machined. So I got to talk to my machinist to see if that's something that he can do on these. It's not something we've ever discussed, so we'll see what's up there. And then what else? Hard part wise, if you count the needle bearing assemblies in the back of the case, it's going to need a couple of those. And then all the soft parts are pretty standard fare. You know, clutches, steels, bushings. You know, paper rubber, filter, you know, seal kit, corrective hydraulics, sonic zip kit, central valve bodies, drop-in valve kit, and then what else? All the electronics, electricals, so variable force solenoid set, speed sensors, harness, transmission temperature switch, and range position assembly. So all that stuff will be replaced, and then anything else I'll let him know, but those are the ones that I believe we need for now. The 3.5R apply ring, I want to replace that too. I think it's pretty beat. All right, as always, thank you so much for watching. Greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, go leave them below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thank you again.